You know what time it is. Yes, yes, get into it, yes. We're back, my lovelies, we're back. We're back with another installment of Storytime with Chris. As I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max, relax, and chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, study time, break time, CP time, anytime that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, science fiction, adventure, music, and many, many more in between. Hi, y'all. We're back. So, I've had a bit of a day. Last night was not, it was great, but some stuff happened that turned that around. But we don't carry the defeatist attitude over here at Storytime with Chris. No. I had a rough day today. I was a bit subdued. I was not as buoyant and bubbly as I typically am. And a lot of people misconstrue that as though I am either angry or upset by something or saddened by something, which it's more likely the latter of what I said, which is I'm saddened by something. And as somebody who lives with high anxiety, major depression disorder, high frequency mania, and bipolar depression, I deal with a lot of these things. And I have my days where I'm really good, and I have days where I'm kind of down, and today I'm just feeling down. It's not any specific someone's fault. I'm just not feeling as what I normally would feel. But I didn't want to miss this because I love you all. And we have these conversations so that you can know that if you are having a rough day at school or just not feeling it today, you don't have to. This is what I would caution. Even when someone has hurt my feelings or has upset me, I am the type of person that chooses to be quiet, to be polite, to be mannerable, to answer questions when necessary, when they are posed to me. But for the most part, I retract my energy. To retract is to pull back, to pull in. Like a retractable claw. There it is. Or as a snake, a retractable fang. There it is. But I retract my energy because I do that because I don't want to say anything that I don't mean. And I don't want to put out my frustration onto someone who doesn't deserve it. That's why I do that. And I do it so that I can think about, in the midst of my silence, okay, why is it that I'm still feeling this way? What has caused me to feel this way? What can I do to make it better? What can I do to fix it? So I'm constantly thinking of contingency plans, meaning a plan with a backup. So a thought out, thorough plan. A contingency is a plan that is executed when something goes wrong or something does not go right. And Batman, primary example, always has contingency plans. Like if he's captured, he's got Robin, he's got Nightwing, he's got Red Hood, he's got Batgirl, a Signal even, Blue Jay, Catwoman. He's got all these contingency plans. He's like, even if I go down, I have somebody else who can pick up the slack. So I take the time, even when I'm working, if I'm not having a great day, I don't be nasty or rude to people. I am a bit quieter and a bit more subdued. And it works for me. And for somebody who doesn't know me, that doesn't know that about me, I can't help if they misinterpret that. And then I politely correct them like, no, the question you should be asking is, are you doing okay today? Are you feeling all right today? And if I give you an answer, take it for fact. Take my word for it that what I said is true. So take the time to think about your feelings, sit in those emotions rather than throwing a tantrum, rather than being mean to people because you're having a bad day, rather than talking nasty to people. Take some time to reevaluate, or if you're able to, I just need a mental health day to where I can recalibrate. It happens. All right. We're about to, go into the final chapter of part 3, where Bran and Will are in the Lost Land. They've entered the Lost Land. They've gone through the city. the underside of the city, then came out on the top where they were able to be seen by all of the citizens, then came to the Rose Garden, which then led them to the country, and then they were attacked by the Riders of the Dark. Then they were able to get to the castle, which houses the glass tower, the glass crystalline tower of the King of the Lost Lands, and they have been able to stop the wheel that could have sliced them to bits. Used the twigs that they gather from the 7 trees, of the different types of trees and what they mean in regards to medicine and its position in nature and the seasons. And now Bran and Will and Gwion have finally entered the Crystal Tower, the glass tower of the King of the Lost Land. Chapter 15, The King of the Lost Land. They stood staring at one another. Outside the tower, the fury of the dark rose as if the whole world were roaring. Will hunched his shoulders instinctively, feeling the force of it like a blow. And then suddenly, it was gone. The tumult dropped, vanished altogether. They could hear nothing at all but the faint hum of the wheel whirling outside. The abrupt change was more unnerving even than the noise had been. "What are they doing?" Brad said. He was taut as a tight-wound spring. Will could see a muscle twitching at the side of his jaw. "Nothing," Will said with a confidence that was not real. "They can do nothing here. Forget them." He stared round the square room, filling the length and breadth of the tower into which they had just come. "Look." Brightness was everywhere. A soft greenish light filtered through the quartz-like walls of the room. It could be a cave of ice, Will thought, but this was a cluttered, busy place, as if someone had left it in a hurry while preoccupied with some great complex matter. Piles of curling manuscript lay on the tables and shelves, and on the thick rush mat that covered the floor, against one wall, an enormous heavy table was littered with strips of shining metal and chunks of glass and rock, red and white and greenish blue, all among an array of delicate gleaming tools which reminded Will of the workshop behind his father's jewelry shop at home. Then his eye was caught by something high on the wall, a plain round shield made of gleaming gold. Gwion leapt light-footed up to a table and took the shield down from the wall. He held it out. "Take this, Will. 3 shields. Once in the days of his greatness, King Gwitnol made for the light. 2 of them were taken by the light at places where danger might come, and the 3rd left here. I have never known why, but perhaps this moment now is why, and has been all along. Here." Will took the round, gleaming thing and slid his arm through the holding straps on the inner side. "It's beautiful," he said. "And so are the other 2 that he made. I've seen them, I think, in other places. They have never been used. Let us hope this one need not be used either," Gwion said. Bran said impatiently, "Where's the king?" He was looking up at a curving wrought iron staircase, wonderfully curlicued, which spiraled its way up to disappear through an opening in the high glass ceiling of the room. "Yes," Gwion said, "up there. We shall go up, but you must let me lead. We shall come to certain rooms in which you will see no one, and at the last we shall come to the king." He set one hand on the curving rail of the staircase and looked hard at Will. "Where is the Belt of the Signs?" "It is in the Battle of Mount Badon," Will said wistfully, "where Merriman took it to the Great King for as much of the winning as can be achieved there. And it will be at the last encounter, too, when the lady comes, and all the power of the light is joined, but not until then. And then only if—" He stopped. "Arias," Brad said, his voice tight. "Arias." Gwion said swiftly, "Do not say the name yet. That must wait. Only in the sword's own presence may it be named by its name inside this tower. Come." They climbed the spiraling staircase up and through rooms that were scattered with the impedimenta of living, of eating and sleeping, and yet had, too, the strange deserted look of places left abandoned for a long time. And then Will, last in line, came up to find Bran and Gwion standing silent in a great room unlike any that had come before. The light filtering through these walls was not cool and icy green, but dim light, filtering through these walls was not cool and icy green, but dimmer, more subdued, for they stood now inside a great hemisphere banded in gold and translucent glass, so that Will knew it must be the dome top of the tower, from whose peak a golden arrow pointed out at the sea. The dome was warm, its floor stripped with the sunlight that slanted through the banded roof. And yet it was a strangely gloomy place, bringing a heaviness to the senses. The room had held only one square table, set to one side, a carved wooden screen, and a scattering of big, high-backed chairs as sturdy as if they were carved from solid blocks of wood. "Guion," a voice said. Soft echoes whispered around the dome. It was a husk of a voice, low and without strength. It came from a tall chair facing away from them on the far side of the dome. They could see nothing but the chair's back. "I am here, my lord," Guion said. His eyes were warm, and there was love and patience in his voice, as if he spoke to a troubled child. And two from the light are with me." There was a long pause, with no sound in it except the faint crying of a distant seagull outside the dome. The voice said at last, cold and abrupt, "You betray me. Send them away." Guion crossed the room swiftly and dropped on one knee before the tall carved chair. In the hands of dim light through the roof, they saw his lean, brindled, bearded face upturned to the unseen king. He said, loving loyalty bright as a flame in his face, "I betray you, my lord?" No, the voice said wearily. "I know better, but you must send them away, minstrel. In that, you should know better." Will said impulsively, coming forward, "But majesty, the danger is too great." He paused just behind the chair. He could see one thin hand lying limp on the chair arm, wearing on one finger a great dark stone ring like Guion's ring. He said in as level a voice as he could manage, "My lord, the dark is rising in its last great attempt to take control of the earth from men, and we of the light cannot prevent that attempt unless we are armed with all the things of power made for our purpose. We have all of them but the last, the crystal sword, which long ago you made for us, my lord, the king, and which now you guard." "I guard nothing," the voice said listlessly. "I exist, merely." Will said, "But the sword is here, as it has been always since its making." His eyes were roving around the room in search as he spoke. "We may not take it unless you give it to us. Give it to us now, majesty. I beg you." "Leave me alone," the voice said. "Leave me alone." It was full of an aching sadness that made Will long to give some comfort, but the urgency of his quest was louder yet in his mind. "The sword is for the light," he said persistently, "and to the light it must go." He was looking at a wonderfully carved wooden screen that stood against the slanting wall of the dome, near where the king sat. Was it there simply as a lovely object to be looked at, or to hide something else from view? The voice said with dull petulance, "You do not say 'must' to me, old one, if old one is what you are. I have forgotten all such names." Behind Will, Brand said sharply, "But we must have Arias." The thin hand on the chair tightened briefly into life. The fingers curled and fell back again. "Guion," said the empty voice, "I can do nothing for them. Send them away." Guion still knelt, looking up, his face lined with concern. "You are weary," he said unhappily, dropping all ceremony. "I wish you were not always alone." "Weary of life, minstrel, weary of the world." The voice was a winter leaf blown by the wind, withered, dry. "No purpose, no savor. Time tosses my mind where it will, and my useless life is the empty cawing of a crow, and any talent I once may have had is dead. Let the toys that it made die with it." The slow words came from so deep a despair, like a black pit giving back no sound when a stone is dropped in, that the small hairs crawled on the back of Will's neck. It was like listening to a dead man speak. Bran said clearly, coldly, "You speak like the Murray Luvid, not like a king." The fingers of the hand curled and again briefly, and then again lay limp. Into the voice crept the weary contempt of long experience faced with the blind ignorant vigor of hope. "Boy, callow boy, do not speak to me of life that you have not lived. What do you know of the weight that drags down a king who has failed his people? An artist who has failed his gift? This life is a long cheat, full of promises that can never be kept, errors that can never be righted, omissions that can never be filled. I have forgotten as much of my life as I can manage to forget. Go away so that I may be free to forget the rest." As Will stood speechless, held by the dreadful deep self-loathing in the husky voice, Bran came up level with him, and all Will's senses shouted at him suddenly that a change had begun, that from this moment Bran would no longer be merely the strange albino boy with the tawny eyes obscure in a North Wales valley where the villagers looked at him sideways and the children mocked his pale face and white hair. Gwitno, Gran here," Bran said in a quiet command as cold and hard as ice, with a Welshness very strong in his voice. "I am the Pendragon, and the destiny of the light is in my hands to be held or lost. I will not countenance despair. Arias is my birthright, made by you at my father's bidding. Where is the crystal sword?" Will stood trembling, his fingernails digging into his palms. Very slowly, the figure in the chair leaned forward a little and turned towards them, and they saw the face of the king just as they had seen it in the rainbow over the fountain in the rose garden, and a little long while before. It was unmistakable, a thin face with cheekbones high as wings and lines carved deep in the flesh by sadness. Great channels of despair slanted down from nose to jaw, and shadows lay round the eyes like dark mountain pools. The king glanced first at Will, and then he saw Bran. His face changed. He sat there motionless, dark eyes staring. There was a long moment of silence, and then the king said, whispering, "But it was a dream," Gwyad said softly. "What was a dream, Majesty?" The king turned his head to Gwyad. There was a heartbreaking simplicity in him suddenly, like a small child telling a secret to a friend. "I dream endlessly, my minstrel. I live in my dreams. They are the only things this emptiness does not touch. Or sometimes they are black and dreadful, nightmares from the pit. But most of them are wonderful, full of happiness and lost joy and delight in making and being. Without my dreams, I should have gone mad long ago." "Ah," Gwyad said wryly, "that is true of many men in this world." "And I dreamed," the king said, looking wonderingly again at Bran, "of a white-headed boy who would come and bring both an end and a beginning, the son of a great father, with all his father's strength in him, and more besides. And it seemed to me that I had known the father once long ago, though I cannot tell where or when. Through the mists the emptiness has put in my mind. The white-haired boy. There was no color in him anywhere in my dream. He had a white head and white brows and white lashes to his eyes, and he wore dark circles of glass to protect those eyes from the sun. But when the circles were taken away, you could see that the eyes were enchanted. The golden eyes of an owl." He stood up shakily, supporting his thin frame on one hand against the chair. Gwyad lunged forward to help, but the king raised his other hand. "He came running," he said. "He came running to me across the room there, and the sunlight was in his white hair, and he laughed at me. And it was the first music of that kind that this castle has heard for so long, so very long." There was a softening in the grim set features, like a faint glimmer of sunshine in a cloud-set sky. He brought an end, but a beginning. He took away the haunting of this place. He knelt down before me in my dream, and he said, Brad laughed softly. Will could feel all the angry tension fall away out of him. The white-haired boy took a few quick steps forward and knelt before the king and said, smiling at him, "And he said, there are 5 barriers to be broken to reach the crystal sword, and they are told in 5 lines that are written in letters of gold and fire over the sword itself. Shall I tell you what they are?" The king stood looking down at him with his life waking in his eyes that had not been there before, and he said, "Yes, tell me." "And when I have told you," Brad was looking up into his eyes in a closeness like an embrace, no longer quoting now, "then that will be a falling away of the 5th barrier, Majesty. Is that not so? For we have come through 4 of them already. The words are witness. And if I can break open your despair, which is the tomb of all your hope, you will let me take the sword." The king said, his eyes fast on Bran, "Then it will be yours." Bran slowly stood up before him and took a breath, and in the Welsh music of his voice, the words came out as a lilting chant. "I am the womb of every holt. I am the blaze of every hill. I am the queen of every hive. I am the shield of every head. I am the tomb of every hope. I am Arias." And King Gwitnos let out a long, long sigh, like the sound of the wave of the sea washing over sand, and with the sudden crash, the carved wooden screen that stood against the wall of the dome fell apart in 2 pieces and lay on the ground, and glowing in golden letters on the banded wall, they saw the lines that Bran had just spoken aloud, clearly written, and below them on a slab of slate lay like a bright icicle, a crystal sword. The king moved slowly, stiffly across the smooth, rush-matted floor. On the back of the dark green surcoat he wore over his white robe, they saw embroidered in gold the royal crest with its roses and leaping fish. King Gwitno took the sword in his hand and turned his melancholy, drooping body towards them again. He ran one finger along the chased flat side of the sword blade, wonderingly as if in disbelief that he could ever have made so lovely a thing. Then taking the sword by the crosspiece of its hilt so that it hung pointing downwards, he held it out to Bran. "Let the light go to the light," he said, "and Arias to its inheritor." Bran took the sword by the hilt, turning it carefully so that it pointed now straight upward. Instantly, it seemed to Will to grow somehow a little more erect, more commanding. The sunlight blazed in his white hair. Somewhere outside the tower from far away, there came a long, low rumbling like thunder. The king said expressionlessly, "Now let come what may." He put his hand up to his head suddenly and rubbed his brow. There was a scabbard. "Gwion, I made a scabbard for the sword." Gwion smiled lit his face. "You did, Majesty, of leather and of gold, and there must be a breaking of the emptiness, as you call it, in your mind, or you would not remember that." It was. The king's forehead creased. He closed his eyes as if in pain. Then abruptly he opened them again, pointing across the domed room to a plain chest of light-colored wood with the figure of a man riding a fish painted in blue on its side. Gwion went to the chest and pulled back the lid. He said after a moment, "There are 3 things." A strange note was in his voice, of some emotion Will could not comprehend. The king said vaguely, 3? Gwion drew from the chest a scabbard and a sword belt of white leather set with strips of gold. "To mask the blaze a little," he said with a smile, holding it out to Bran. "Bran," Will said slowly, listening to deep, faint stirrings within his mind, "I think you should not put the sword into the scabbard yet. Not for a moment." Bran's sword and scabbard in either hand looked at him with raised eyebrows and an arrogant tilt in his white head that had not been there before. He gave a quick shiver and was Bran again and said merely, "All right." Gwion said, still at the chest, "And there is this." His voice shook and his hand too as he took out a small bright harp. He looked across the room at his king. "Not a few moments ago, my lord, I was longing to have my harp that I left in the city so that I could play for you as I did in the olden days." The king smiled lovingly. "That too is your harp minstrel. Long ago I made it for you in the first days in this tower when I was struggling against despair, struggling still to work." He shook his head, wondering. I had forgotten it is so long. I had chosen to be alone, so that all others were barred from this place by the wheel. Yet I missed you and your music so greatly that I made the harp for my Gwion, for my Taliesin, for my player. And I shall play it for you a little, Gwion said. You will find it in tune, the king said, and his smile held an echo of the maker's pride in the thing made. Gwion put down the harp and reached again into the chest. He brought out a small leather bag gathered at the neck by a cord. This is the third thing, he said, but I do not know what it is. He pulled open the neck of the bag, and a stream of small blue-green stones tumbled out onto the other hand, smooth, shining, rounded as though by the sea. One of them fell to the floor. Will picked it up and rolled it around his palm, watching the pattern of color in its sleek, irregular shape. The king glanced at the stones briefly. Pretty, but worthless, he said. I do not remember them. You meant to work with them once, perhaps? Gwion poured the stones back into the bag. Will held out the one that had fallen. Gwion smiled at him subtly. Keep it, he said lightly. He picked out another stone and held it to Bran. And one for you, Bran. Each of you should have a talisman, a piece of a dream to take away with you from the lost land. The king said softly, vacantly. Lost. Lost. The distant, deep rumbling came again outside, louder than before. All at once, the sunlight shafting in through the banded roof faded, and the dome seemed much darker. Bran looked around. What is it? It is the beginning, the king said. His thin voice was stronger now, more alive, as his face was more alive, and though the resigned acceptance in it was very plain, there was no hint now of the dreadful black emptiness of despair. Will said on instinct, we must not stay under this roof. Gwion sighed. He looked at Will with wry affection, and Will never afterwards forgot the look, the humorous wide mouth drawn almost into sadness by the lines of experience running down from nose to jaw, the bright eyes smiling, the crisp curly gray hair, the odd dark strip in the gray beard. He said to Gwion in his mind, I like you. Come, Gwion said. With the harp in one crooked arm, he went to a part of the curved wall that seemed no different from any other part, reached up and with one strong pull slid a whole wedge-shaped section of it to one side. The opening gaped like a triangular door. Outside they saw the sky, a dark, dark gray. Gwion stepped out, down to a balcony. Following him, Will saw a golden balustrade and realized that this too was identical with the balcony that ran around the dome of the empty palace in the city. But as he looked out from the tower, all thought dwindled away. Westward over the sea, a gigantic bank of dark cloud was massing, heavy-mounted, yellowish gray. It seemed to writhe, growling and swelling as if it were a live thing. Will's fingers curled tightly round the strap of the golden shield that he still held on one arm. Bran came out onto the balcony behind him, and last of all came the king, frail now, supporting himself on the side of the opening in the roof, breathing suddenly faster as though the keener outside air were something his lungs had not felt for a long, long time. The low, distant rumbling still filled the air, coming in like a mist from the westward horizon where the dark clouds rolled, yet it was not the rumbling of thunder. It was a deeper, more insistent sound, like nothing Will had heard before. Be ready, Gwion said softly behind him. Will turned and found himself looking straight into the smile-creased dark eyes. He saw a calm determination there and self-possession, but beneath all else a flicker of dreadful blank fear. What is it? He whispered. Gwion took his harp, drew a series of soft, beautiful arpeggios from the strings. He said as lightly as if it were a casual joke, his eyes imploring Will to ignore the terror behind them. It is the death of the lost land, old one. It must come when the time comes. His fingers began patterning the notes into a gentle melody, and the king, leaning against the shining wall of the dome, murmured with pleasure. The rumbling from the western horizon rose, a wind blew against their cheeks and stirred their hair. A strong, warm wind. Will raised his head, sniffing. All at once, the summer air seemed full of a smell of a sea, of salt and wet sand and green weed. The light was dying, the clouds spreading gray over the sky. He heard a faint sound like creaking over his head and looked up sharply. On top of the pointing golden arrow, still gleaming even in the murky light, was swinging gently round, turning quite around, until it pointed inland, away from the sea. A brightness in the sky beyond it caught Will's eye, and he gasped and saw that Bran was staring at it too. Far away out there, on the far side of the Lost Land, over the roofs of the city, still dimly visible in the dwindling light, sudden sprays of light were springing up like fountains to blaze for a second and to vanish again. Like bursting stars, fireworks leapt, splashing the dark sky with brilliant red, green, yellow, blue, erupting over the city in joyous arches of light. There was a wonderful, unafraid gaiety in all the sudden brilliance, as if children were flinging blazing branches out from a fire into a looming wild night. Will found himself smiling and yet close to tears, and in the same moment he heard very faintly over the low roar filling the world now from the west the high, joyous sound of many bells ringing somewhere out there, somewhere in the city. Gwion softly shifted the tune and the time of his melody so that his harp chimed in with the bells, and Will breathed fast as he stood on the balcony looking all around at the livid, menacing sky and the dark sea and the brilliant, gay fireworks challenging both. He was filled with a wild exhilaration that was terror and delight all in one. Terror for a wild exhilaration that was terror and delight all in one. Terror for the people of the Lost Land, delight in the contemptuous defiance that flung out to their doom. Sea grew dark as sky. There was a new rumbling now as the waves grew, their angry tops visible far out, gleaming, throwing spray. The wind put more strongly, whipping the king's thin hair across his face. Will put up his shield as a shelter. Gwion stood playing, moved back slowly towards the opening in the dome of the tower, moving so that the king moved before him, supported by the wall, and then with a great splintering flare of lightning, the sky roared, and the sea seemed to cry out, and a huge wall of water came thundering towards them from the sea, over the sand and reedy marsh, swallowing trees and land, and the lines of the river spreading, swirling, and Bran gripped Will's arm with one hand, and Will saw, turning, that the sword Erias was gleaming bluish white, as if from the inner heat of a fire. In the dark sky over the city, the fireworks suddenly ceased, and the sound of the bells began a long jangling confusion, wild over the lilt of Gwion's harp. Then they too abruptly stopped, but Gwion's music went on. The sea struck at the tower somewhere below. They felt it shake beneath their feet. Wave after wave came roaring. The sea rose higher. The king's light voice called out on the warm, fierce wind, "Lost! Lost!" And out of the raging sea came sailing impossibly towards them, slantwise down the great waves, the chunky boat with its black-haired captain and single tight-filled brown sail, and from his place at the tiller, the sailor reached out an arm to Will and Bran, beckoning, the deck of his vessel almost level for a moment with the balcony of the tower. "Go!" Gwion shouted to them. He stood leaning sideways, his shoulders supporting the failing king. "Not without you! I belong here!" They saw only the last flash of a smile over the shadowy, beardy face. "Go, Bran! Save Erias!" And the words hit Bran like a spur, and he seized Will and leapt with him into the boat, tossing an arm's length away. The boat plunged down the side of a wave. For an instant they heard Gwion's harp sweet and faint through the thundering sea, until one single shattering, blinding streak of brilliance came out of the sky and struck the tower, splintering the dome in two, and the golden arrow was driven from the roof as if it were suddenly a live, malevolent thing, and came hurtling over the waves down towards them. Out of an instinct not his own, Will flung up the golden shield with both of his arms, and the flashing arrow struck the shield in a great flare of yellow light. Both vanished, flinging Will down on his back in the leaping boat. His head rang, his eyes blurred. He saw Bran standing over him with the sword flaming blue in his hand. He heard the waves roar. He saw the lean, dark face of the ferryman twisted with effort as the man struggled to keep the boat heading away from harm. The world tossed and roared in a dark, endless turmoil with no count of time passing. Then there was a lurch so violent that Will lost all consciousness, and when he opened his eyes, he was in a world of gray light and soft sound, the gentle murmuring of small waves on a beach, and he and Brad were lying on a long stretch of sand in a clear morning, with a whitish blue sky overhead. The crystal sword gleamed white in Brad's hand. The scabbard lay at his side. The great beach reached far before them into the estuary of the river Duve. Green sand hills glimmered at its far edge, and beyond over the mountains and the gray roofs of Aberduve came the first golden edge of the rising sun. And that is where we will end for tonight. Even in the midst of despair, even in the midst of destruction, even in the midst of evil and darkness, there is one thing that can never be extinguished, children. It's called hope. Hope. It is the quintessential greatest gift that humanity has. And hope is what may save the world from the rising dark. I'll see you next time, lovelies. Good night.